Hi, my name is Anesh, but I prefer to go by Anya in English because my name is quite complicated to pronounce. And I'm a perfectionist, and that's why I'm here. In this homemade podcast, I'd like to show you the path I'm on right now and my efforts to get rid of my perfectionism. I've been a perfectionist for my whole life, basically, and currently it became something what is bothering me, and I know it's holding me back from going forward. And as one of my favorite mentors, Tony Michel, said, I'm having one feet on gas and the other one on the brakes, and I decided to do something with this and to change it. So I want to show you how to do it. Before I start my story, I'd like to give a shout out to my English speaking friends from our Gila family because they were the ones who gave me the idea of actually making the podcast in two languages, in Czech, which is my native language, and also in English, which is language which I use to communicate with most of my friends. Um, okay, so let's get to the story. To introduce myself more, I'm Anya. I'm 9 years old and I live in Prague. And currently, I'm trying to win over my perfectionism. And I'm going to tell you about my childhood and how this actually started. It all started when I was 6 years old, and there was the time when I started elementary school. Every day after school, my grandma picked me up, and then I went to her house and I was there with her until my parents came back from work. And at the time I was there, it was always a time for me to do my homework. And my grandma told me that this is because if I do my homework first, then when I come back home to my parents, I don't need to worry about school anymore and I can just play. And at the time, I was not realizing, because obviously little children do not realize this usually, that what's happening is like influencing me in a not really good way. And before talking more in depth about this, I'd like to say that I know that my parents and grandma wanted the best for me, and they always do. And now back to the story. My grandma would pick me up, I would go to her house, and she was watching over me while I was doing my homework. She was usually standing or sitting next to me and watching what I write in my homework notebook. And I was also getting some additional exercises from her, like writing or some counting, etc. So it was easier for me to remember everything I needed to know. And I understand where my grandma was coming from because she wanted me to have everything done soon so I can spend the rest of the day only playing and not having to really worry about the school. And as I mentioned, she would always watch me. And one small mistake, for example, I confused two letters because as I was learning how to write, of course, I was making mistakes. Or me just writing ugly, or me having one letter which was tilted to another side than it was supposed to be because I was learning at school to tilt my letters to the right when I was writing. At these cases, she would always like cross out the whole page, the whole homework. She would sign it, and I would have to start again. From this, I was getting an impression that I was not good enough and I had to be better. And of course, if you want to improve, you have to do some work on yourself. You can't just settle in being where you at right now because then you would never improve. And so like to some point, it's fine to like not be comfortable where I am right now and wanting to improve a bit to be a better person. But this was kind of extreme because when I look back, I'm realizing that I was basically forced to be a perfect kid every day. In the morning, my grandma would walk me to the bus stop. I would have to count some multiplications and doing some spelling exercises and stuff like that. And I see that this was definitely making my school life easier because I didn't really have to study until I was in like fifth grade, and I was basically getting all A's because I was trained to remember things fast and to keep them in my mind for a long time. So it definitely had some benefits, but of course, as everything, it also got some shadow side because it made me think that I have to constantly try to be better, that I'm not good enough. I have to do this and that because the current version which was existing was just not good enough. At the time when this was happening, I was not seeing it because, as I mentioned, I was a child which was not really realizing this. But looking back, I see that this is definitely one of the causes of my perfectionism, which I'm trying to fight now. There are also other reasons which are actually connected. The second reason is that my parents wanted me to be a good example for my brother, who is 2 years younger. And at that time, I was told how I needed to be to set a good example. Like, you can do this, you should not do that, and that I have to be always nice, I always have to be humble. I definitely cannot be selfish. So, wherever I got like a gift or a toy or something, I always had to share it with my brother, even though he really didn't care about half of the things. But I had to share it to learn how to not be selfish. And I understand where my parents were coming from as well, because you don't really want your kid to be a spoiled, selfish brat. But me having to listen to this so often, I later, and this is the third reason of my perfectionism, I later took these thoughts as my own. My parents stopped repeating this to me, but my head was continuing with this job, quote unquote job, like really successfully. My head took all of these opinions as my own, and it was just unstoppable. It continued every day. I got like so many thoughts about having to be a perfect sister, having to be a perfect example, having to do that and not being able to do this, and it was just messed up. And as I mentioned, I know that my parents were doing their best or what they knew and what they could while they were raising me. It was really not easy for them to raise me and my brother, and they just wanted me to be a good person who will have a good education, have a good job, and who would not have to suffer the way they had to. So they were really trying to do their best, and this story I'm telling you right now is definitely not meant as any accusation or complaint on how I was raised. The way my head took these things as my own opinion could be also caused by the fact that I'm hypersensitive. And this is also something I didn't know for a long time. I realized it like last year, maybe. And I'm still trying to work with it. But basically, what happens is that I take in every small detail which is around me. And my nature is to analyze things, oh my God, sorry, analyze things really deeply. And by thinking and by analyzing everything, I get to the point when my head is basically constantly running, constantly creating some thoughts and just overthinking. And it creates some thoughts and doubts about how others see me and that I have to behave in a certain way to be considered a good person. I know that this is like not the truth, but overthinking brain is just giving you the worst possible scenarios about everything, and you think it's like the constant, like, what if, even though you know that these things might not even happen, but your brain just does this. Okay, so to sum it up somehow, There were three main influences in my life, which led to my perfectionism. With two of them, I can't really do anything because I can't return to the past to tell my grandma to not do this or to tell my parents to do things differently. But there's one thing I can change and one thing I have to change, and this is my brain. Because, like, it's not my parents anymore, it's not my grandma anymore who would be doing this to me. It's my own head. And if I skip to my current life, like which I'm living right now, nobody around me is pressuring me. Nobody is forcing me to be better. I have people around me who are understanding, who are not wanting me to be perfect all the time, every time. So basically, it's just my head, which is unconsciously keeping all the patterns which are not useful anymore. They're useless and I have to get rid of them. And this is a huge step out of my comfort zone. And by the way, just me creating this podcast out of nowhere is like a huge step out of my comfort zone. I just want to say that, and this is something what I learned from my mentor, Tony Michel, as I mentioned, your authenticity is the biggest enemy of perfectionism. So it's normal to make mistakes. Just be yourself and be authentic. I realized this now, and it took me some time to even realize that I'm like suffering with perfectionism. But when I realized this, and when I learned what is actually the worst enemy of perfectionism, I'm trying to do it. I'm trying to fight it. So I'm trying to be my authentic self as much as possible. When I make any mistake, I just go and admit it because it's normal, and I'm trying to not be perfect. And I have a story connected to this, and this story actually helped me realize even more, and it helped me start with this podcast. Few days ago, I got a class with my mentor, and after that, I was thinking, what is the thing which is stopping me? What is the thing which I should change? Or like I should just do something with it. And I realized that it was the perfectionism. So, as my mentor said, when you feel ashamed about something or a guilt about something, just go and face it. Talk about it, be authentic. So, I picked a photo which was buried in my gallery in the phone because I took it some time ago, but then I didn't like it, and then I was like, it's not good enough to be posted. So I didn't post it. But this time I took this photo, the most imperfect photo I was able to find, and I posted on my Instagram talking about, publicly talking about the thing which is stopping me, which is bothering me. And I felt really good after because this was something what just just this thing, like doing the first step of fighting what is holding you back, it feels good. And then I got the idea. I want to create a podcast about my life, about me fighting perfectionism. And why? Because actually, like, it'll be my authentic self and it can be useful for somebody. When I was searching for some podcasts about perfectionism and things like that, there were not many, and usually it was just like one episode in a longer podcast, and it didn't really feel right. I didn't feel connected to the content. And then I thought, okay, this is the content I'm missing, so I'm just gonna go and I'm gonna create it. And this is also why yesterday I was creating the first episode. I didn't even think that uh it could be good, so I didn't prepare. I didn't have a proper mic. I was sitting on my bed, like recording the intro for 10 times or I don't know how much time, how many times. And it just worked out somehow. So, yeah, this is why I'm here. I'm going to be creating this podcast about my life story. So, some of you can maybe relate to this. And I'm creating this because I know that I was searching for the same thing. It was not here. And I know that it feels good when you can actually relate to something or like relate to some story of somebody else so you don't feel that alone in the situation. Okay. So, if you like this podcast, let me know by following the podcast or liking the episode, or there will be also a poll under this podcast, so you can vote there. And I'll do my best to come with other episodes every week. Czech episodes will be released every Wednesday, and English episodes will be released every Thursday. Thank you for staying here until the end. And I have one thought, and these are like for the end. And this is actually these are the things I always needed to hear, and nobody told me. So I will tell them to myself, and also I'm gonna tell them to you as well. Be yourself. Be authentic. You don't have to prove yourself to anyone. It's normal to make mistakes, and it's human to make mistakes. And the last thing, you are enough the way you are right now. Okay, so bye for now and see you here next week.